For centuries, humanity has studied the words of Jesus, debated his parables, and divided itself over interpretation. Yet despite thousands of sermons, doctrines, and theological systems, something essential still feels missing. Many sense that the teachings meant to transform consciousness were reduced to moral lessons, symbols, or belief systems, while the deeper activation was quietly forgotten. If you have ever felt that the story of Jesus Christ holds more than history, more than religion, more than metaphor, then you are already feeling the gap between what was taught publicly and what was transmitted privately. The question is not whether truth exists, but why it feels just out of reach. In this video, we explore the teachings that were never meant for the masses alone, the knowledge entrusted to those prepared to hear beyond language and symbol. We journey into the suppressed texts once hunted, burned, and silenced, yet miraculously preserved in the Nag Hammadi Library. We revisit the Bible not as dogma, but as encoded instruction. Together, we examine the forgotten teaching of the single eye, the awakening of the third eye, the pineal gland, the pine cone-shaped center of perception through which Jesus taught his closest disciples to access, knowing beyond belief, beyond intellect, beyond doctrine. This is not speculation. This is remembrance. By the end of this journey, you will no longer see these teachings as distant or inaccessible. You will begin to understand how what was hidden was never lost, only veiled in plain sight. This perspective does not add another belief system. It dissolves the illusion of separation itself. You are not being asked to follow, worship, or submit, but to see, to perceive the world, yourself, and consciousness through new eyes. The real question is no longer what did Jesus mean, but are you ready to activate what he was pointing toward? If you are prepared to encounter Jesus Christ beyond religion and step into direct knowing, this is where that awakening begins. If you feel that what has just been said touches something very deep within you, subscribe to the channel right now. Not to blindly believe, but to reflect together, ask questions, and explore layers of meaning that have been hidden for too long. Your subscription, likes, and shares of this video will not only help the channel grow, but also help this message reach souls ready to awaken. Now, let's set aside what you've been taught to believe. Join me on another journey where forbidden texts are revealed, where the Bible is no longer dogma but a map, and where the teachings of Jesus are not just to be heard, but to be experienced. This story isn't meant to convince you, it invites you to see for yourself. Section 1. The verse they hoped you would never hear. There is a verse that has been repeated for centuries, spoken aloud, memorized, even revered yet rarely heard. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eye becomes single, your whole body will be filled with light. At first glance, it sounds gentle, moral, symbolic, almost harmless. A poetic line meant to encourage purity or focus. But when you slow down, when you stop reciting and begin listening, the words begin to do something else entirely. They move. They press. They awaken a sensation that feels older than language itself. For some, it arrives as a faint pressure behind the brow, at the quiet meeting point between thought and wonder. For others, it feels like a soft internal hum, a moment of recognition without memory. Not learning something new, but remembering something ancient. Something you somehow already knew. The ancients had a name for this inner seeing. They called it the third eye, the hidden gate between perception and knowing, between the visible world and the one that exists beneath it. It was understood not as metaphor, but as a faculty, a way of seeing that did not rely on the physical eyes at all. Modern anatomy gives it a different name, the pineal gland, a small, pearl-like structure buried deep within the brain, mysteriously sensitive to light even in complete darkness. A biological paradox. A compass not designed to measure distance or direction, but awareness itself. This is where the verse shifts from poetry to precision, because to the teacher who spoke these words, this was never meant to be abstract inspiration. It was not a moral suggestion or a spiritual metaphor wrapped in safety. It was instruction, quiet, deliberate, and exact. A guide for those prepared to hear beyond the surface, and to discover what happens when the eye becomes single and the light turns on from within. Before we move forward, take a moment to pause with what you just felt, not just what you understood, but what stirred beneath the words. This is the point where many rush ahead, but true insight deepens when you reflect. If this section resonated with you, let me know by tapping the like button. It helps this message reach the ones who are meant to hear it. And if you feel called, leave a comment sharing what this verse awakened for you, or simply type, "I am ready to see," as a quiet affirmation of your awareness. From here, we go deeper beyond the verse itself and into what was hidden behind it all along. Section 2. The mechanics of awareness. When Jesus spoke of the single eye, he was not offering a metaphor meant to be admired from a distance. He was pointing directly toward a lived experience of unity, the moment when divided perception collapses back into wholeness. It is the moment when the senses stop contradicting one another, when inner and outer no longer compete for dominance, and perception itself becomes coherent, integrated, and clear. In that instant, duality begins to dissolve. The rigid lines between holy and profane soften. Matter and spirit are no longer opposites but expressions of the same source. Inner and outer realities cease their tug of war and reveal themselves as reflections of one continuous field. The same light that burns in distant stars is not separate from you. It breathes quietly behind your eyes, waiting to be recognized rather than worshipped. Among those who listened, reactions varied. Some heard only a moral lesson, something to guide behavior or reinforce belief. Others felt something far subtler and far more powerful, a quiet ignition, as if a hidden code within them had been activated. What was spoken did not ask for faith. It did not demand agreement. It invited awareness. This was not preaching in the traditional sense. It was instruction precise, experiential, and inwardly directed. He was teaching how perception works, how reality fragments when awareness is divided, and how it reunifies when attention becomes whole again. And when perception stops breaking reality into opposing parts, heaven no longer feels like a distant realm or a future promise. It is no longer something to be reached, earned, or waited for. It rises naturally from within, revealed not by belief, but by clarity. Section 3. The fracture and the forgetting. The mystics speak of an ancient moment when humanity perceived through a single, unified vision. There was one language then, not shaped by words or symbols, but composed of light itself. In that state, nothing was ordinary. Every leaf carried intelligence. Every breath felt deliberate. Every heartbeat shimmered with purpose, as if existence itself were quietly speaking and we were fluent in its meaning. Then something shifted. Awareness fractured not violently but precisely, like glass responding to a frequency it could no longer hold. Unity splintered into countless reflections, and from those fragments arose a world of division, interpretation, and noise. We learned to mistake that noise for reality. We learned to listen outward instead of inward. We learned to forget. You feel this fracture living inside you now. It appears as a tension between stillness and thought, between simply being and endlessly becoming. One part of you remembers how to rest in presence, while another is constantly pulled into motion, definition, and identity. The Gnostics named this condition hypnos, not sleep, not laziness, but enchantment, a subtle trance, the dream of separation in which the many forget they once were one. Each day, screens glow, headlines shout, and arguments collide, reconstructing a modern Tower of Babel from endless competing narratives. Languages multiply, meanings fragment, and attention scatters. Yet beneath all of it, beneath the distraction and the division, the memory has not vanished. It waits. It appears as a quiet warmth behind the brow, a soft pressure at the center of awareness. A sense that something ancient and familiar is gently tapping on the window of the mind, not demanding entry, only reminding you that it has always been there. Section 4. The Kingdom Within. When Jesus spoke of the kingdom as being within you and spread across the earth, he was speaking in the original tongue of remembrance. He was not describing a distant heaven to be earned or found later. He was reminding humanity of a truth that had never vanished. Heaven did not leave, only perception dimmed. What mystics once carried in parable, science now approaches through another dialect. It gestures again toward the pineal gland, the quiet organ that keeps time with the sun and yet emits its own faint glow, a lantern woven into flesh. Ancient wisdom and modern inquiry meet here, not in contradiction, but in convergence. To awaken the third eye is not to manufacture light. Nothing new must be created. The light is already present. Awakening is the act of ceasing to scatter it. It is the return of attention, the gathering of what has been dispersed by noise, fear, and endless seeking. Listen closely and you will hear it. The hush between words, the breath you forgot you were holding, the small, unannounced kindness passing between strangers. These are not trivial moments. They are signals. They are the language of light remembering itself. Humanity is not fallen. Humanity is asleep. Before we move forward, take a moment to pause with what you have just felt rather than what you have just heard. Let the words settle not in the mind, but in the quiet space behind the breath. Reflection is part of the awakening. If something in this section stirred recognition, confusion, or calm, honor that response. Share your thoughts or experiences in the comments so others walking this path know they are not alone. And if words feel unnecessary right now, simply type, "I remember the light within," as a gentle affirmation of what is already returning. Section 5. Carrying the lamp into the world. Awakening often arrives with a quiet temptation to disappear, to escape the noise, retreat to the mountain, build a monastery of silence where nothing can disturb the light you found. The pull is understandable. Stillness feels safe. Distance feels pure. Yet the teacher's path does not ascend away from life. It moves downward into streets and kitchens, offices and inboxes, into the hum of conversations and the friction of ordinary days. The light does not ask you to leave the world behind. It asks you to live inside it, fully embodied. The miracle is not rising above the mess. The miracle is walking through it without forgetting who you are. The kingdom does not announce itself with thunder. It glows in pauses, in a breath taken before a reply, in forgiveness offered where resentment would be easier, in patience chosen over reaction, again and again. These are not small acts, they are thresholds. Each moment of attention polishes the lens through which you see. Each act of presence widens the beam you carry. The lamp grows brighter not by withdrawal, but by use, by being held steady in motion, by being shared in places where light is most needed. To carry the lamp into the world is to remember continuously, to answer emails with awareness, to listen without preparing a defense, to move through life awake, letting the glow pass through your hands and into the day. Section 6. The method behind the miracles. The Messiah was not performing magic tricks meant to impress or mystify the crowd. What he demonstrated was something far more profound: mastery over perception itself. The so-called miracles were not violations of natural law, but revelations of a deeper one: the power of consciousness when it is unified, disciplined, and undivided. Turning water into wine was not about spectacle. It was an act of transmutation, the ability to recognize potential where others saw only limitation. Where the mind perceives lack, awakened awareness perceives possibility. Walking on water was not defiance of gravity, but the steadiness of consciousness rising above chaos, fear, and emotional turbulence. Healing the blind was not merely a physical cure. It was the restoration of inner sight, the moment awareness remembers how to see beyond appearances. Every miracle functioned as a mirror. Each one reflected what becomes possible when perception is singular, focused, and free from fragmentation. They were demonstrations, not exceptions, signposts pointing toward a state of being available to anyone willing to cultivate it. Behind every act stood one essential discipline: the mastery of attention. Attention was the instrument through which reality shifted. Where attention goes, energy follows. When attention is scattered, power dissolves. When attention is unified, transformation becomes inevitable. The desert, often misunderstood as a battle against an external force, was in truth an initiation into this discipline. It was not about resisting temptation imposed from the outside, but about learning to starve illusion of attention. Craving, the need for validation, and the desire for control all dissolved in silence, not through struggle, but through non-engagement. What is not fed by attention cannot survive. This is the true asceticism of attention. It is not fasting from food alone, but fasting from identification with thought. It is the withdrawal of belief from the stories the mind repeats, and the return of awareness to its own still center. From that center, miracles are no longer extraordinary. They are simply the natural outcome of perception aligned with truth. Before we move forward, take a moment to pause with what you've just heard. Let these ideas settle not as concepts to analyze, but as reflections to feel within your own awareness. If this section resonated with you, support the channel by liking this video so this message can reach others who are ready to hear it. I'd also love to hear your thoughts. Share in the comments what stood out to you most, or how this reframes your understanding of miracles and attention. And if words feel unnecessary right now, simply type "I choose conscious attention" as a quiet declaration of alignment. With that awareness anchored, let's continue into the next section. Section 7. The still point of light. Each time you choose to pause instead of react, something subtle yet profound takes place within you. In that quiet moment of restraint, when impulse softens and awareness steps forward, scattered energy begins to return home. Each time you observe fear without allowing it to define you, without collapsing into its story, the fragments of your attention slowly gather again at the center of your being. What was once divided by thought, emotion, and urgency starts to reunite in a single point of presence. That center has been spoken of across traditions as the lamp of the body, the silent axis behind the brow where perception originates. It is not a concept to be understood, but a location of direct knowing. When your attention becomes whole rather than scattered, perception itself shifts. The world is no longer filtered solely through reaction and memory. Instead, experience begins to illuminate from within. Creation takes on a subtle radiance, not as a poetic idea, but as something felt quiet, intimate, and undeniably real. Eventually, there comes a moment when seeking naturally dissolves. Not through effort, and not through dramatic revelation, but through an unexpected stillness. The restless movement toward answers, toward experiences, toward some imagined future state simply comes to rest. In that pause, you recognize something essential. You were never meant to chase the light. You were meant to arrive at the place where you realize you have been standing in it all along. The single eye was never meant to impress the world or overwhelm the senses. Its power is quieter, almost invisible. It does not demand attention. It dissolves resistance. It softens the way you see until even what once felt dark begins to glow with understanding. When the eye becomes single, holiness is no longer something you chase through places, symbols, or names. It stops living in distant temples or future promises. It reveals itself in the ordinary rhythm of life, in the pause at a red light, in the lines of effort etched into tired hands, in skies that move slowly, unconcerned with your urgency. This path is not an escape from the world. It is a full arrival into it. The journey does not end with answers or revelations that separate you from others. It ends where it began, in light. But now the light is no longer something you search for or defend. It is something you share. It moves through you quietly, expressed as patience instead of reaction, kindness instead of judgment, presence instead of performance. You are not asked to preach this truth. You are not asked to convince anyone of it. You are simply asked to live it. When your seeing becomes gentle, your presence itself becomes the teaching. Your calm becomes the message. Your way of being becomes the sermon. The lamp was never outside of you. It was never hidden in doctrine or guarded by authority. It was always the eye. And the eye was always the light. If this journey from secret verse to silent practice resonates with you, if it feels less like belief and more like remembrance, then make your declaration below. Comment clearly and exactly. I do not believe I know. I will read every comment. If this message brought clarity, stillness, or recognition into your awareness, support the work by liking this video, sharing it with someone who may need it, and subscribing to the Spiritual Flow channel. And when you are ready, continue the journey by watching the next video below.